My new manager thought I was just another employee he could replace, but he had no idea I owned a big part of the company. Everything changed the day we were called into an emergency meeting. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Naira Cade. I had always kept my head down and focused on my work. I didn't chase attention or office politics. I believed if you stayed consistent and did your job well, things would fall into place. For years, that worked for me. I built trust, handled tough situations, and became someone people quietly relied on. Then Kale Voss arrived. From the first week, something felt off. He watched me closely, like he had already made up his mind about me. Small things started happening. Meetings I was supposed to lead were suddenly handed to someone else. Decisions I made were questioned without reason. It wasn't loud or obvious, it was slow and careful, like he was testing how far he could go. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself maybe he just had a different style. But it didn't stop. The pressure grew, and the environment around me started changing. People who used to support me became distant. Conversations would end when I walked in. It felt like I was being pushed into a corner without anyone saying it directly. I realized this wasn't random. It was planned. And that's when I understood, if I stayed quiet, I would lose everything I had worked for. Before everything started going wrong, my life at work felt steady and predictable. I had been there long enough to understand how things moved, who handled what, and where I fit in. I wasn't the loudest person in the room, but I didn't need to be. People came to me when something needed to be done right. I kept things simple. I showed up on time, met deadlines, and handled problems without making noise about it. Over the years, that quiet approach earned me trust. I didn't chase praise or titles. What mattered to me was doing my job well and keeping things running smoothly. There was also something I never shared with anyone. After someone important in my life passed away, I was left with a portion of the company. It wasn't something I talked about or used to gain attention. To me, it was just a responsibility, not a tool for power. I chose to stay in my role and continue as if nothing had changed. Most days were routine. I handled my tasks, supported my team, and went home without stress following me. It felt balanced, almost comfortable. I had no reason to think that would change. Looking back now, I realize how calm everything was before things shifted. At the time, I thought that stability would last. I didn't see any warning signs. I didn't expect anyone to come in and try to shake everything I had built. But that quiet phase didn't last forever. Something was already on its way, and I had no idea how much it would test me. The shift started the moment Kale Voss took over. You could feel it in the way he carried himself, controlled, distant, always watching. He didn't try to build connections or understand the team. Instead, he moved straight into making changes. At first, it was small things that didn't seem worth reacting to. He would interrupt me while I was explaining something, then rephrase it like it was his idea. He'd ask questions that sounded less like curiosity and more like doubt. It wasn't about improving anything, it felt like he was trying to make me look unsure. Soon, the changes became harder to ignore. Tasks I had handled for years were suddenly given to others without any explanation. Meetings I was expected to attend happened without me. Important updates stopped reaching me on time. It created gaps in my work, making it seem like I wasn't keeping up. What bothered me most wasn't just the actions, it was how precise they were. Nothing he did was loud enough to draw attention. If I complained, it would sound like I was overreacting. But when I looked at everything together, the pattern was clear. He wasn't just managing the team. He was reshaping it, and I was being pushed out of the center of it. Every move felt planned, like he had already decided I didn't belong there. I tried to stay focused and not let it affect me, but it was getting harder. The space I once felt secure in was slowly slipping away, and I could feel the pressure building day by day. What hurt more than his behavior was how the people around me started to change. These were people I had worked with for years, people who once trusted my judgment without question. Slowly, their tone shifted. Conversations became shorter, eye contact faded, and I could feel a quiet distance growing. Bryn Hale was one of the first I noticed. We used to work closely, sharing updates and solving problems together. Now, replies came late or not at all. When I asked about things we were supposed to handle as a team, I'd get vague answers or none. It felt like I was being kept out on purpose. At the same time, strange things started happening with my work. Tasks I completed would show up under someone else's name. Reports I sent would be lost, only to reappear later without my credit. When I tried to speak up, it always came back as confusion or miscommunication, never anything clear enough to prove. Little by little, it began shaping how others saw me. I could sense the shift in meetings. People hesitated before agreeing with me. Some avoided involving me at all. It was like a quiet story was being built behind my back, one where I was no longer reliable. I didn't need anyone to say it out loud. I could feel it forming, this idea that I wasn't performing the way I used to. And the worst part was how carefully it was being done. Nothing direct, nothing obvious. Just enough to make me question everything while making it hard to defend myself. The moment it became impossible to ignore happened during a full team meeting. Everyone was there, and the focus was supposed to be on upcoming plans. I was explaining a project update when Cale cut in. His tone was calm, but his words weren't. He started pointing out small things, twisting them into bigger issues. He questioned my approach, then went further, saying my way of working didn't match where the company was headed. The room went quiet. No one stepped in. No one pushed back. I stood there, trying to process what was happening without showing how much it hit me. It wasn't just feedback, it felt like he was trying to define me in front of everyone. Like he wanted that idea to stick. I responded as professionally as I could, keeping my voice steady. I explained my decisions clearly, but it didn't seem to matter. He had already set the tone. The discussion moved on, but the damage stayed. After the meeting, people avoided the topic. A few gave me quick, awkward looks, but no one said anything directly. It felt like something had shifted again, this time more openly. What made it harder was everything behind it. I had put years into my work, handled pressure, solved problems, and stayed committed even when things got tough. Hearing my place questioned like that, in front of everyone, wasn't just about the job. It felt personal. I didn't react in the moment, but inside, something changed. I knew this wasn't going to stop on its own. After that meeting, I stopped reacting on the surface. I didn't argue or defend myself in front of others anymore. Instead, I paid closer attention to everything happening around me. I listened more, spoke less, and started noticing details I had ignored before. Patterns began to show. People who had been with the company for a long time were either stepping back or suddenly leaving. Some were moved into smaller roles without clear reasons. At first, it looked like normal change, but the timing didn't feel random. I also noticed who was coming in. New faces started appearing, and many of them seemed already connected to Cale. They were given space quickly, included in decisions right away, and trusted without question. It didn't match how things used to work. I started putting pieces together quietly. This wasn't just about me. It was bigger than one person being pushed aside. It looked like a shift in control, done step by step so no one would question it all at once. The more I observed, the clearer it became. I wasn't being singled out by accident. I was simply one of the first people in the way. Others would likely follow once I was out. That realization changed how I saw everything. It wasn't personal in the way I first thought, it was strategic. And if I kept treating it like a simple conflict, I would miss what was really happening. So I stayed patient and kept watching. I needed to understand the full picture before making any move. That night, I went home with a lot on my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. Instead of trying to push it away, I decided to face it directly. I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in a long time and took out a folder that had been sitting there for years. It was from Orrin Vale, the person who had guided me early in my career. He had always believed in me, even when I doubted myself. After he passed, he left behind more than just advice. I had kept those papers safe but never really looked at them closely again. At the time, I didn't feel the need to. Now, everything felt different. I sat down and went through each page slowly. What once felt like something distant suddenly became real. The numbers, the signatures, the terms, they weren't just formal details. They meant something bigger than I had allowed myself to accept. For years, I had chosen to stay in the background. I focused on my role, my tasks, and my team. I avoided stepping into anything that felt like authority. It was easier that way. It kept things simple. But as I read through those documents again, I realized I had been looking at my position all wrong. I wasn't limited to the space I had been given. I had a voice that carried weight, I had just never used it. That understanding didn't feel exciting at first. It felt serious. It meant responsibility. It meant I couldn't keep standing still while everything around me shifted. For the first time, I saw clearly that I had a choice to make, and staying quiet was no longer one of them. The next step came sooner than I expected. I was called into a short meeting with Cale. It felt formal, but there was something cold about it. He slid a document across the table and asked me to read it. It was a performance review plan. Every line was written in a way that made it look like I had been falling behind for a long time. It listed issues that didn't match my actual work. Some points were twisted, others completely out of context. It was clear this wasn't about improvement, it was a setup. I looked up at him, waiting for some kind of real explanation, but there was none. He kept his tone neutral, almost rehearsed, like this was just another routine step. That made it worse. It showed how planned this had been. I didn't argue. I didn't react the way he might have expected. I simply listened, asked a few calm questions, and took the document with me. Inside, though, something had shifted completely. Walking out of that room felt different. The doubt I had been carrying for weeks was gone. In its place was clarity. This wasn't something that would fix itself. Waiting, hoping, or staying quiet would only make things worse. That night, I sat alone and thought everything through carefully. I went over every detail, every pattern, every choice I had made until now. For the first time, I stopped thinking about how to adjust or survive the situation. Instead, I started thinking about how to respond. I realized I had been holding back for too long, trying to avoid conflict and keep things stable. But there was no stability left to protect. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. The next morning, I didn't follow my usual routine. Instead of going straight into work tasks, I made a call I had been avoiding for a long time. I reached out to the board and asked for an urgent meeting. I kept my words clear and direct. I didn't explain everything over the phone, I just made it clear that it couldn't wait. Once the request was accepted, things started moving quickly. Notices were sent out, schedules were cleared, and a time was set. It was no longer something happening quietly in the background. This was official. When Cale heard about it, he didn't take it seriously at first. I could tell by the way he reacted, casual, almost amused. To him, it probably looked like one last attempt from someone already on the way out. He didn't see it as a threat. That changed the moment he received his own invitation to attend. The day of the meeting, the atmosphere felt completely different from anything I had experienced before. The room was filled with people who held real authority, decision-makers, legal experts, and those who rarely stepped into day-to-day matters. Conversations were low and careful. No one treated this like a routine discussion. I took my seat quietly and waited. I didn't feel nervous the way I thought I would. Everything I needed was already prepared. This wasn't about reacting anymore. It was about presenting the truth clearly and letting it speak for itself. When Cale walked in, his expression had changed. The confidence he usually carried was still there, but now it was mixed with uncertainty. For the first time, he didn't seem fully in control of the situation. And that was exactly where things started to shift. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't rush. I took a moment, looked around the room, and made sure everyone was listening. My voice stayed calm, but firm. I wasn't there to argue anymore, I was there to lay everything out clearly. I started by explaining my position in the company. Not just my role, but the part that had been quietly overlooked for years. I showed the documents that confirmed my 22% ownership. Some people in the room shifted in their seats. A few exchanged quick looks, clearly not expecting that. Then I moved to the main issue. I presented records I had gathered over time, emails, decisions, and internal changes that showed a pattern. It wasn't about single mistakes. It was about how certain actions kept repeating in a way that pushed experienced people out and replaced them with selected hires. I didn't raise my voice or add emotion to it. I let the facts speak on their own. Each point connected to the next, forming a picture that couldn't be ignored. As I continued, the atmosphere in the room changed. The earlier calm started to feel tense. People who had been relaxed earlier were now paying close attention. Even those who hadn't been directly involved started realizing the weight of what was being shown. Cale didn't interrupt. He just sat there, watching, as the situation unfolded in front of him. For the first time, he wasn't steering the conversation. By the time I finished, the room felt completely different from when I had walked in. The balance had shifted, and everyone understood it. After everything was laid out, the energy in the room didn't stay the same. People started talking in low voices, trying to process what they had just heard. The clarity I had brought made it impossible to ignore the situation anymore. Cale, who had walked in earlier with certainty, was no longer in control of the moment. He tried to respond a few times, but his words didn't carry the same weight they used to. The support he once had in the room started slipping away, piece by piece, as questions replaced assumptions. What struck me most was how quickly the mood changed once facts were fully visible. People who had followed his lead without hesitation earlier were now stepping back, rethinking everything they had accepted without question. By the time the meeting ended, decisions were already being made in private discussions. It didn't take long before he was officially removed from his position while everything was reviewed in detail. The shift happened faster than anyone expected, but it felt like something that had been building for a while. Outside that room, things moved even faster. Communication lines were opened with legal teams, and internal reviews began immediately. The structure Cale had been putting in place started coming apart under its own weight. At the same time, those who had supported his decisions found themselves in uncomfortable positions. Bryn and a few others who had stepped away from me earlier suddenly realized they were also being questioned. Their confidence disappeared as they tried to explain choices they had made without thinking about the consequences. Everything that once felt stable inside the company was now being examined closely, and nothing was left untouched. After the chaos settled, I didn't feel the need to make a scene or prove anything to anyone. I stayed calm and focused on what needed to be done next. The company still had work to continue, and I wasn't going to let everything fall apart because of what had happened. I stepped back into my role, but things were different now. People listened more carefully, not out of fear, but because the truth was finally clear. I didn't rush decisions or try to prove authority through force. I simply acted with clarity and consistency, and that was enough. The first thing I addressed was the structure that had been quietly built over time. Some changes had to be undone, and certain decisions needed correction. I didn't do it emotionally. I looked at everything with a steady mind and focused on what actually made sense for the company. I also made sure the team was realigned in a healthier way. The goal wasn't punishment, it was stability. The people who stayed were those who cared about their work and understood responsibility without hidden agendas. As things slowly settled, I thought about everything that had led to this point. It wasn't just about one person or one situation. It was about what happens when silence is mistaken for weakness. Cale was no longer part of the picture. Whatever confidence he once had didn't matter anymore. His actions had spoken louder than anything else, and the outcome followed naturally. I didn't feel proud or angry. I just felt steady. The situation had come full circle, and now things were finally in the right place again. And I learned something I won't forget: people should never be underestimated just because they choose not to speak first.